Shalom and welcome to His Word Heals. This program is focused weekly on living and praying in agreement with Yahweh's Word. If this is your first time tuning in and you would like to hear more, please visit our website at www.hiswordheals.com. Last week we looked at Yom Teruah and found that Teruah does not necessarily mean blowing the shofar, but instead can be any joyful noise or sounding alarm. The moed, or appointed time, where we are actually commanded to blow the shofar of Teruah is Yom Kippur, or Day of Atonement, as we saw in Leviticus 25:9. I also mentioned last week that perhaps the 7 trumps of Revelation are 7 Yom Kippurs. I want to take a closer look at that possibility this week as we head toward Yom Kippur. But first, let's start in Revelation chapter 11, which basically summarizes the entire 7-year tribulation. 11 verses 1 and 2 summarize the first 42 months, which is what we're going to read now, and then verses 3 through 19 summarize the last half of the tribulation, or the last 3.5 years. So verses 1 and 2 go from the beginning of the tribulation through the third trump into the middle between the third and fourth trumps. And a reed like a measuring rod was given to me, and this is John, of course, speaking about his vision. And the messenger stood, saying, Rise and measure the dwelling place of Elohim, and the slaughter place, and those worshipping in it. But cast out the court which is outside the dwelling place, and do not measure it. For it has been given to the nations, or the Gentiles, and they shall trample the set-apart city under foot for 42 months. So John is given a reed-like rod. The word for rod in the Greek means scepter or staff, and a reed is flimsy, and the Greek word reed also can be a pen or writing instrument because they were made from reeds. So then a reed-like rod could indicate a written decree or law from those in power. Let me read that again and insert reed-like rod or reed-like scepter. And a reed like a measuring rod, or reed-like rod, or reed-like scepter, was given to me. And the messenger stood, saying, Rise and measure the dwelling place, and the slaughter place, and those worshipping in it. So what is John told to do with the reed-like rod or scepter? In the King James Version, he is told to measure the temple, the altar, and those that worship there, but not to measure the outer court, or outside the temple and altar, because it is given to the Gentiles to trample down for 42 months. So where it says it is given to the Gentiles, of course, the Greek word there means to the nations to trample down for 42 months. So measuring the temple and altar can certainly mean to rebuild it, but because you can't measure something that isn't built, or being built, something that isn't there or planned, that won't be measurable. So the temple either has to be planned or there in order to be measured. But let's look at the Greek word for measure. It not only means to actually measure something, but also means to add measure or allot by rule, meaning this reed-like rod or scepter, or, in other words, flimsy written law or decree, will allot or direct who has authority or rule over the temple altar and who gets to worship there. At the same time, this flimsy written law or reed-like scepter does not decree who can and cannot trample or be in the outer court or area outside the temple and altar. So it's not measured in this written decree that anyone has authority over it. In other words, it is given to the nations. There is no particular allotted rule over this outside area, everything outside the temple and altar. Instead, it will be given to the Gentiles or nations. For example, could that be United Nations, the world? Jerusalem, will be an international city, everything outside the temple and altar belonging to the world, all nations, given to the nations to trample underfoot. The main audio for this video comes from 2 radio programs that I did last year for Hebrew Nation Radio and Messianic Lamb Radio, and you can see those posted on our website at hiswordheals.com right here and right here. And then I took those 2 programs and I updated them just a little bit and reused them for this year's Yom Kippur and Yom Teruah. And here is our Yom Kippur program for Hebrew Nation Radio this year. As you can see, I posted it on September 23rd, 2019. And this was before, I posted it on before September 23rd, 2019, actually, to air on September 23rd, 2019. And this was all done before I heard anything about President Trump's speech this year at the UN, which also took place day one on September 23rd. So now watch this clip that I saw after I posted this year's replay of last year's programs on Hebrew Nation Radio. Here is day one, True News from the United Nations General Assembly. And when I heard this, I was pretty blown away that it was a second witness to what I'd put in this program.
Officials from the administration was present was, of course, Ivanka Trump, Jael Kushner. Her husband was not there, but the Commerce Secretary, Wilbur Ross, the Treasury Secretary were there. It was basically a cabinet meeting.
It was.
But it was very clear, again, that this was it was some kind of a compromise. Some kind of a deal has been struck with the UN, because President Trump specifically said that what will be launched out of this Religious Freedom Initiative, which was first started by Secretary Pompeo last year as part of a ministerial level initiative, is that there will be an agreement where the UN would take over some form of protection. They were very vague with this, but some form of protection, even stewardship, over relics and holy sites throughout the world.
Right. Now, catch that, Rick, where they said the holy sites, yes.
So if I'm right, this could be the deal, the peace deal, possibly the one that Trump is working on right now. Perhaps he is going to be revealing a flimsy written decree that gives Israel an area on Temple Mount for a temple and altar in exchange for Jerusalem to be an international city for all nations to trample underfoot. And this time will last 42 months, perhaps? Likely during these 42 months, sacrifices will be reinstated. The nations will decry the killing of animal sacrifices, and then the Antichrist or Anti-Messiah will break the deal and take away the sovereignty or allotted rule of the Jews over the temple and altar by stopping the sacrifices. We are told that will happen in Daniel 12:11. Wikipedia, status of Jerusalem. 3 times it mentions that it should have been an international city, according to the 1948 agreement. TheModerateVoice.com has a lengthy article. Jerusalem, an international city. You might want to read that again, that ModerateVoice.com, TheModerateVoice.com. And at the bottom it says, wars of religion and ideology have plagued humanity for at least 2,000 years, making Jerusalem an open, internationally governed city that ultimately welcomes all the world's religions on an equal basis may act as an antidote to religious conflict. Jerusalem could be a role model of pan-religious harmony, emphasizing spiritual similarity of all religions rather than the doctrinal differences. So this would kick off the 7-year tribulation. It would be given at the beginning of the 7 years and last 42 months. So let's look at the trumps of Revelation, starting with the first trump. In Revelation 8:2, 7 messengers or angels are given 7 trumpets, and just before the first trump is sounded, verses 3 through 5 tell us another messenger stood before the altar holding a golden censer to offer it with the prayers of the saints, or set-apart ones, upon the golden altar before the throne. The tabernacle in the wilderness was patterned after what Moses was shown in heaven, and the golden altar before the throne in the tabernacle was the altar of incense. The smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints went up, and then the messenger in Revelation took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it to the earth, causing noises, thunders, lightnings, and an earthquake. If we look at Leviticus 16:12 through 13, we can see Revelation 8:3 through 5 is the first act of Yom Kippur service in the tabernacle. Leviticus 16:12 through 13 says, "He, the high priest, shall take a censer full of burning coals of fire from off the altar before Yahweh, and his hands full of sweet incense beaten small, and bring it within the veil. And he shall put the incense upon the fire on the altar of incense before Yahweh, that the cloud of the incense may cover the mercy seat that is upon the testimony, that he die not. After this first part of the Yom Kippur service in Revelation 8:3-5, the first angel sounds the first trump, possibly marking the first of 7 Yom Kippur trumps. After this first Yom Kippur trump, Revelation 8:7 says, "There came to be hail and fire mixed with blood thrown down to the earth, and a third of the trees were burned up with all the green grass." Of course, most everyone agrees that the trumps of Revelation take place during the Great Tribulation. Referring to the time of great tribulation after the abomination of desolations is seen in the holy place, we are told in Mark 13:19, "For in those days shall be affliction, such as was not from the beginning of the creation which God created unto this time, neither shall be." Leviticus 23:27, speaking of Yom Kippur, tells us, "On the 10th day of this 7th month there shall be a day of atonement. It shall be an holy convocation unto you, and ye shall afflict your souls, and offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh." Are we commanded to afflict our souls on Yom Kippur because Yom Kippur is a picture of, or warning regarding, the affliction that takes place during the time of great tribulation spoken of in Mark 13:19? Note also the command of an offering made by fire on Yom Kippur. After the first trump of Revelation 8, hail and fire mixed with blood were thrown to the earth. Is this the Yom Kippur offering made by fire, and the blood of the offering that is sprinkled on the altar of the earth? It is interesting that after this first Yom Kippur trump, Revelation 8:7 tells us, "There came to be hail and fire mixed with blood thrown down on the earth, and a third of the trees were burned up with all of the green grass." Since we just saw in Revelation 8 that the first trump kicked off the Yom Kippur service in heaven, it stands to reason that the second trump could be a continuation of the Yom Kippur service the following year. While it is possible that all of the trumps of Revelation take place in 1 year, I highly doubt that is the case for the simple reason that the 2 witnesses will witness for 3.5 years during the Great Tribulation during the 7 trumps. So then it would stand to reason that each trump represents 1 Yom Kippur, or 1 year, and continues to build upon the year before. Next, the second trump sounds in Revelation 8:8-9. We are told at the second trump a great mountain burning with fire is thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea becomes blood, a third of the living creatures in the sea die, and a third of the ships are destroyed. Then the third trump sounds, and a great star, wormwood, burning like a torch, falls from heaven onto a third of the rivers and fountains of water, and many died from the bitter waters. This is the judgment of the unfaithful wife whose thigh rots and belly swells if she is guilty of adultery when she is made to drink bitter water in Numbers 5:14-24. So now we would be at the end of the 42 months in the middle of the 3rd and 4th trump, or the 3rd and 4th Yom Kippur. That would be 3.5 years from the first trump. So again, we go back to chapter 11 of Revelation and start reading in verse 3-14, which summarizes the next 3.5 years. "And I shall give unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clad in sackcloth. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands that are standing before the Elohim of the earth. And if anyone wishes to harm them, fire comes out from their mouth and consumes their enemies. And if anyone wishes to harm them, he has to be killed in that way. These possess authority to shut up the heavens so that no rain falls in the days of their prophecy, and they possess authority over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they wish. And when they have ended their witness, the beast coming up out of the pit of the deep shall fight against them and overcome them and kill them, and their dead bodies lie in the street of the great city, which is spiritually is called Sodom and Mitzrayim, or Egypt, where also our Master was impaled, or a Messiah. And some of the peoples and tribes and tongues and nations see their dead bodies for 3.5 days, and not allow their dead bodies to be placed into tombs. And those dwelling on the earth rejoice over them and exult. And they shall send gifts to each other, because these 2 prophets tortured those dwelling on the earth. And after the 3.5 days a spirit of life from Elohim entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell on those who saw them. And they heard a loud voice from the heavens saying to them, Come up here. And they went up into heaven in a cloud, and their enemies saw them. And in that hour there came to be a great earthquake, and 1/10 of the city fell, and in the earthquake 7,000 men were killed, and the rest became afraid, and gave glory to Elohim of heaven. The second woe is past, and see, the third woe comes speedily. Okay, so I'll stop there. That was verse 14. The 4th, 5th, and 6th trumps sound during the time of the witnesses, and the 7th trump sounds after the witnesses are killed, probably when they are resurrected. The plagues that the witnesses call out would then match up with the events happening during the 4th, 5th, and 6th trumps. Then the 4th trump sounds, and 1/3 of the sun, moon, and stars are struck and become darkened. 1/3 of the day does not shine, nor 1/3 of the night. This is like the judgment of darkness over Egypt for 3 days in Exodus 10:22. Remember, though, that during this darkness over all of Egypt, all of the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. The 5th trump sounds, and a warning of the first of 3 woes to come is issued. During the first woe, a star falls from heaven with the key to the bottomless pit. The star with the key opens the pit, and smoke comes out covering the sun, and out of the smoke come locusts with the authority of scorpions. They cannot harm the earth, grass, or anything green, but can only torture for 5 months those men which do not have the seal of Elohim on their foreheads. It is quite interesting to note that if this theory is correct and each trump of Revelation is sounded on Yom Kippur, there are about 5 months between Yom Kippur in the 7th month and Nisan, or the 1st month, which is the month of Passover. Then, when the 6th trump sounds a year later, John hears a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar which is before Yahweh. In a Yom Kippur service, what is put on the 4 horns of the altar of incense? Leviticus 16:18. And he shall go out unto the altar that is before Yahweh, and make an atonement for it, and shall take of the blood of the bullock, and of the blood of the goat, and put it on the horns of the altar round about. Leviticus 16:19-20. And he shall sprinkle of the blood upon it with his finger 7 times, and cleanse it, and hallow it from the uncleanness of the children of Israel. And when he hath made an end of reconciling the holy place, and the tabernacle of the congregation, and the altar, he shall bring the live goat. Remember, the Yom Kippur service is the one time per year that the high priest, and only the high priest, can go into the Holy of Holies, the innermost sanctuary, which is where the lamb slain is seen earlier in Revelation. So then let's consider Hebrews 9:1-7. Then verily the first covenant had also ordinances of divine service, and a worldly sanctuary, for there was a tabernacle made, the first, wherein was the candlestick, and the table, and the showbread, which is called a sanctuary. And after the second veil, the tabernacle which is called the holiest of all, or Holy of Holies, which had the golden censer, and the ark of the covenant, overlaid round about with gold, wherein was the golden pot that had the manna, and Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of the covenant, and over it the cherubims of glory shadowing the mercy seat, of which we cannot now speak particularly. Now, when these things were thus ordained, the priests went always into the first tabernacle, accomplishing the service of Elohim. Into the second went the high priest alone, once every year, not without blood, which he offered for himself and for the errors of the people. Then continuing in Hebrews 9:11-12 and 24-28, we read, Messiah being come an high priest of good things to come, by a greater and more perfect tabernacle not made with hands, that is to say, not of this building, neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood, he entered in once into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us. For Messiah is not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are the figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of Elohim for us, nor yet that he should offer himself often, as the high priest enters into the holy place every year with the blood of others, for then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world. But now once in the end of the world hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And as it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this the judgment, so Messiah was once offered to bear the sins of many. And unto them that look for him shall he appear the second time without sin unto salvation. This passage in Hebrews chapter 9 is clearly showing us a Yom Kippur service in heaven where Yeshua is high priest who enters into the holy place to put his own blood as the sacrifice for atonement on the horns of the altar that is before Yahweh. Back to Revelation 9:13, which tells us, the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar which is before Elohim. Whose voice would be coming from the four horns of the golden altar before Yahweh in heaven? That would be Yeshua's, the high priest, who applied his own blood to the four horns of the altar in heaven. Would this not be his blood from the four horns of the altar speaking? Again, what takes place at the sixth trump of Revelation is confirming that these trumps are Yom Kippur services taking place in heaven, but manifesting in events on earth during the time of Great Tribulation. The voice coming from the four horns of the altar says to the messenger or angel with the sixth trump, release the four messengers bound at the river Euphrates to kill a third of mankind with the horses of a 200 million man army, out of whose mouths came fire and smoke and sulfur, by which plagues they killed the third of mankind. And then we are told the rest of mankind not killed by these plagues still did not repent. Back to chapter 11 of Revelation, starting in verse 14. The second woe is past, and see, the third woe is coming speedily. We are told earlier in Revelation that the last three trumps were the last three woes. They were woe, woe, woe. 3 more woes were coming. During the second woe, the witnesses are killed. After the witnesses are killed, it says the second woe is past, and see, the third woe is coming speedily. Then in verse 15, the seventh messenger sounded, and there came to be loud voices in the heavens, saying, the reign of this world has become the reign of our Master and of his Messiah, and he shall reign forever and ever. So after the seventh trump, at the end of the 7th year, is the third woe, which is when the bowl judgments will be poured out after the 7th trump. Verse 16, and the 24 elders sitting before Elohim on their thrones fell on their faces and worshipped Elohim, saying, we give thanks to you, O Yahweh El Shaddai, the one who is and who was and who is coming, because you have taken your great power and reigned, and the nations were enraged, and your wrath has come, and the time of the dead to be judged, and to give the reward to your servants the prophets, and to the set apart ones, and to those who fear your name, small and great, and to destroy those who destroy the earth. And the dwelling place of Elohim was opened in heaven, and the ark of his covenant was seen in his dwelling place, and there came to be lightnings and voices and thunders and an earthquake and great hail. Then the 7th trump sounds, and the messengers with the 7 bowl judgments pour out their judgments on the earth, after which the martyrs are resurrected, and Hasatan is bound for 1,000 years. Let's take a few moments to prepare our hearts to speak with our Abba in heaven, our Creator, in the name of His Son and our King and Savior, Yeshua, our Messiah. Baruch haba b'shem Yahweh. Blessed is he who comes in the name of Yahweh. Thank you, Abba, that through Yeshua you heal the sick, Cleanse the lepers and cast out demons. Thank you that you don't leave the fatherless without a father, the sick to be sick, nor the widows widowed. Abba, we know that there are many of your people all over the world that are going through trials and hardships right now, Abba, and you alone know their individual stories and the reasons for their hardships and trials. We pray for them right now, Father, the children that have been abandoned or abused, the poor that are without homes, the families that are separated or broken. We know that all of these hardships are caused by or are deserved result of the sins of mankind and are falling away from your righteous laws and right rulings. But we also know of your great mercy and love for us all, that you have provided a way back to you through your Son, Yeshua. We ask that your merciful Spirit, called the Comforter by Yeshua, would be poured out on your people, that we would turn and glorify you, that Yeshua's words would be burned into our hearts and our minds, and that your healing and provision would be poured out upon us all. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Amen. If you're interested in a more detailed Revelation timeline, please visit Messianic Lamb Radio's YouTube channel under the His Word Heals playlist. We have a video there called 80 Years If Due to Strength, which is based upon the 80-year generation of Psalms 90. In that video, we have taken the Revelation timeline, putting the seventh trump on Yom Kippur 2028, which is the 80th year after Israel again became a nation in 1948. Then we laid out the timeline backwards from there, with each trump being blown on successive Yom Kippurs. As an added bonus, we also inserted the signs in the heaven which will be occurring during the next 9 or so years, to just see how they would line up with the Revelation timeline and the 80 years if due to strength generation. The results are quite amazing. They're even included 2 Purim blood moons in a row. So again, please check out that video on the Messianic Lamb Network's YouTube channel under the His Word Heals playlist. It is Video 2, 80 Years If Due to Strength. Blessings and shalom to all of you and everyone in your home.